Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks for sticking around till 4 o'clock. It's always tough being the last session of the day. So we're going to talk a little bit about test-driven development. Who here is developer? I was hoping that. I don't know how I got into the DevOps and CI/CD track. I know maybe it was my mistake. I'm not sure, but I'm glad you're all developers. What? Because of tests. It fits into CI because of tests. So a little bit about me. My name's Deandrea. I'm a Java champion. I've been doing software development for 25, 30. I currently work for IBM, formerly at Red Hat for many years. I work on the engineering team for Quarkus and LangChain for J. If you're familiar or not familiar with those open source projects, I get paid to work on open source software. So it's like the dream job here. So I'm also local to the Boston area. You don't have to worry about taking pictures. I've got a QR code that has a link to the slides, and you can have them all after the fact. I also run the local, or help run the local Boston Java users group. So we are a very active community. We meet in Burlington the second Thursday of each month, and sometimes 2 or 3 times a month because we've got presenters who come from all over the world. Jeremy over here has spoken for us this year, and we've got a pretty good lineup for the rest of the year as well. We're going to do a meeting in Watertown at Athena Health. One of these, I forget which one, but one of these meetings. We may do one up in Lowell as well, but we're pretty well established. We've been going for several years now. We'd love, if you want to learn more, you want to get involved in your local community, please, our meetup page is up at the top here. Sign up and come join our meetings. They're free, and we give you pizza. No beer, sorry. I've also written a book which has nothing to do with what I'm going to talk about today, but if you're interested in Quarkus or Spring, there's a book that I've written. It's free. I don't make any money. So, but let's get to, because I know we've only got, my timer says 27 minutes. This talk is usually an hour talk. So I'm trying to squeeze, my wife is always like, 30 minutes, I don't know if I could get up on stage and talk for 30 minutes. For me, it's like trying to squeeze something into 30 minutes is the hard part. I'm giving the same talk at a conference in 2 weeks, and I've got an hour and 15 minutes to give the whole talk. So I'm going to shrink and expand the talk here based on the time. So we're all here because we want our code to work, right? Who gets that feeling like whatever version control system you use, you check it in, it goes through code review, and it gets merged, and it makes it to production, right? You get a good feeling when that code goes to production. How long does that code live in production? People are like, ooh, a long time, right? Forever, yeah, that exactly. Your code lives for a long time in production. So because it goes and lives for a long time, how can you be sure that it works, right? Because as a developer, and I'm a developer, this is what I want. It passes, it's green, ship it. In the open source world, this is sometimes the mentality we take. Oh yeah, it's a beta. Let our users figure it out, and they can file issues if it's broken. But if you work I grew up in financial services. I worked for a lot of financial companies. This doesn't work in financial services, right? You can't be losing people's money. It just doesn't work. So today, and I don't have a lot of slides because I've only gotten down to 26 minutes here. What we're going to do today is we're going to build a whole application from scratch using test-driven development. Anybody do test-driven development? Anybody heard of test-driven development? Anybody thinks that's a waste of time? Good, no hands. So this is what we're going to build today. And we're going to take an application. We're going to build an application that listens for HTTP requests over REST, talks using Hibernate to a Postgres database, and then has some Kafka in it with some topics and whatnot. Now, I said this is an hour talk, and this is a 30-minute slot. Anybody think I can actually do this in 30 minutes? I got one guy who says, yeah. Unfortunately, no. I know what my limits are, and we're not going to be able to do the whole thing in 30 minutes. If I had 45 or an hour, I could probably do the whole thing. So we're going to do what most project managers do, is we're going to shrink the requirements to fit the time frame, right? Because that's what we do in real life. So we're going to throw away the Kafka part. We'll forget about the Kafka part. But the full application that I'm going to build is out here. Actually, I've got a QR code here. If you want to see the full thing built, it's already there. So I'm really not doing it on the fly, but we're going to do this on the fly here. So, everybody Java people? No Java people? One Java kind of semi-Java person in the back? Couple Java people? All right, so we're going to use Java. we're going to use Quarkus because Red Hat loves Quarkus, right? IBM loves Quarkus. We're all one big happy red-blue family here. So we're going to start by creating a new application from scratch. And this is where I'm going to need my glasses because I'm old and I can't read my laptop. So, but the problem with my glasses is when I put them on now, I can't see you. You're all blurry to me. So I'm going to be doing this and this a lot. All right, so we're going to call this our TDD demo. We're going to use Java 21. We should be using Java 25 because that just came out this week, right? But I haven't tested it yet, so I'm not going to test in production. I'm going to go with what I know here. So we're going to add a few dependencies. So we need to build a REST application. So we need a REST dependency. So I'm going to say REST Jackson. Does anybody not know what Jackson is? Jackson is a JSON parser for Java. It serializes back and forth between Java objects and JSON or XML. It's multi-purpose. XML is old. We don't do XML anymore. I need my Hibernate. So Hibernate is our object relational mapper tool. We need a Postgres JDBC driver, right? We need, I always like OpenAPI when you build OpenAPI or when you build RESTful APIs. I need a health extension because if you're ever going to put this into production, you want a way to monitor whether your application is alive or not, and the health extension will just give you that for free. It gives you an endpoint that says, yep, I'm alive, I'm alive, I'm alive, especially on Kubernetes. Right? And so now we're going to generate our project. Make this bigger. Is that big enough for everybody to see? Or do I need to make it bigger? A little bit bigger? You're old, I'm old too. Is that better? Folks in the back? Yeah, okay. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna add some extra dependencies here in my POM file. And for some reason, my IntelliJ stopped working yesterday, so all the templates I had built out don't work, so I'm gonna have to cheat a little bit and copy and paste some stuff. Only in the XML files, I don't know why, but I filed a bug with IntelliJ last night. So we got that running here. And then we have some code that's already here that I'm gonna get rid of because I don't need it, right? It generated some random code for me that I don't really care about. Okay, and that generated some tests, which is great, but I don't want these tests, right? All right, so now we're from a clean slate here. I'm just gonna add a few properties into my properties file. Say it works in the properties, but not in the XML file. For some reason, IntelliJ was broke on me overnight. And so now we can start our application. Oops. Ooh, what happened here? So if you're not familiar with Quarkus, Quarkus comes with this thing called developer mode. So what you can start to see is it's saying things like initialize my data service, Postgres. So if I actually go to another terminal here, and I run podman ps, you can actually see that there's a Postgres database running in a container because Quarkus saw that I have a JDBC driver, a Postgres driver on my class path, and I didn't configure it, so it says, oh, you must want Postgres, so let me start up a Postgres instance for you. And it's already configured and bound to my application so that I don't have to do anything. All right. So now let's start creating some code. So, so there's this theory behind test-driven development that says you're supposed to write all your tests before you write a single line of code, right? I'm more of I like test-driven development, but I'm more of a pragmatist, I like to practice it, but practically. Writing all your tests always before you write a single line of code to me is not practical. Does that mean sometimes I'll write some code and then I write tests? I kind of flip back and forth, but I still think that thinking about your tests as you're writing the code helps you come up with a good design, because if you come back to code that you wrote and you're like scratch your head and say, okay, now how do I test this? Then the design's probably not good in the first place. So sometimes I will write some code before I write tests, and that's what I'm going to do right now. So the first thing we need if we're going to talk about pet adoptions is we need something that represents a pet, right? Which is the pet entity class, which is going to be a simple Java Pojo with some fields and getters and setters. And if I were to write the test for that, I'd essentially be saying, set this field to this value and assert that it's true. To me, that's just a waste of time, right? You can pretty much guarantee if you're going to have your IDE generate code that a POJO is going to do what you want it to do. All right. So, but everybody loves AI, right? So who uses AI to write your tests? Anybody use AI to write your tests? Shame on you. Shame on you. Shame on you. Why? Why is that bad? Jeremy, I'm picking on you because I know your name.
Also, like I would like when you generate some code here, I would use AI to just scaffold test for generating code.
Yeah, so I mean, this is personal opinion here. My personal opinion is your tests are like your pot of gold. Your tests are the verification that the thing actually works. If anything, have AI generate your code as long as your tests pass. But how do you know that it actually wrote the right test that tests the right things if your AI is generating your tests? So I'm going to start by having some AI write some code for me. Oops. So I'm going to go over here to my little AI assistant. And I know it's so small here, so I'm going to type in a prompt here to say I want it to create a JPA or Java Persistence API entity class. And hopefully the Wi-Fi behaves, otherwise I'm going to have to hand code it. All right, so it generated some stuff, and we'll have it add to my project here. And of course, it calls the class pet, but puts it in a class and a file name called pet entities. So I need to fix that, right? AI doesn't always do the right thing. All right, so I have a pet entity. Is anybody not familiar with the Java Persistence API? Most of you aren't Java folks, but the JPA spec is a specification put out by the Java language that defines interactions with databases. So you can model your database tables as objects, and it takes care of all the underlying persistence, fetching, storing, mapping the fields to database columns and all that fun stuff. So I can say that this is an entity. It belongs to a table called pets. It has an ID that's driven out of an auto sequence name pet sequence that has a size of 1. So that means each time I get a new record, it increments it by 1. And then I've got a couple other fields and a couple constructors. Oh, and it didn't even finish coding my getters and setters. Look at that. Or I didn't wait long enough. I got too antsy. There's all my getters and setters. So would you write a test for this class? Probably not, because my theory is you're going to be using this class in other parts of your application where you're going to be using the fields and setting the fields, so that it'll get covered in those places. I don't feel like when you say a unit test, you need to write a test for every single class that you have. For me, I like to think about tests or the word unit as your own definition of what a unit is. Maybe it's a module within your application. Maybe it's a class. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's larger. Maybe it's smaller. But it's kind of fluid and flexible as to what you want it to be. All right. All right, so now I'm going to insert some data. Oops, I already have the import.sql here. And so I can insert, so I'm going to insert a few records, right? And now if I go to where's my terminal here? So another cool thing about the Quarkus dev mode is I can hit the D key, and it's going to open up a browser to what's called this little dev UI, and every dependency that you have on your class path will show up when you're running it in this development mode in this little thing. But now I can go into my database view, and you can see there's actually 3 records in my database. And without me having to restart my application or anything, it's already populated. Anybody familiar with Node.js and do Node.js development? You know, as you start your dev server and you just keep coding and it keeps whipping changes out on the fly, it's kind of the same concept here. All right. All right. So now let's create a repository or a backend layer. So the first thing you can see is no tests found, right? So the other kind of cool thing with the Quarkus dev mode is it has this feature called continuous testing. So every test that you have, it will auto-discover your tests, and then it understands the relationships between your code and your tests. So as you change your code, it will automatically rerun the tests that are affected by that change in the background. But right now we don't have any tests yet, so it hasn't run anything. Yes?
Do you have time for questions while you're going through this, or should I just shut up and keep it to myself?
Let's keep it in just so I can get through it, and then we can do questions at the end. Usually I like to do them as we go, but this is a short session here. So let's create a test. So we know we need some kind of back-end repository for our pets, right? So we're going to call this our pet repository tests, right? And the first thing I'm going to do is all of our tests are what's called Quarkus tests, and then I'm going to annotate this with test transaction. So what test transaction means is if I write tests, my tests are running against a real live database, not an in-memory database. They're actually running against a Postgres database that the test instance is bootstrapping for me automatically. And so if I change the data in the database during a test, it will automatically roll back at the end of the test. So every test starts from a clean slate, which is kind of a good practice when you're just doing testing in general, is to not mutate state between tests, right? So if I throw in here, oops. So I have a setup test method. I do some assertions, do some imports. You think with all this AI stuff, it would remember which imports I want. So assertions, if anybody's not familiar with the AssertJ library in Java, awesome open source library for doing fluid assertions and whatnot. It is very, very good. You see there's this pet repository thing that's red. Well, I don't have a pet repository, right? It doesn't know what that is. So I'm actually just going to create one. I'm going to say inject, and I'm going to have my dependency injection inject an instance of it. Pet repository. And it still doesn't exist. So now I'm going to have IntelliJ create the class for me, right? And so I'll put my class over here and my tests over there, and let me hide this to give me some more space. So I can make this a bean. So in Quarkus, it follows a lot of the Jakarta specs, so context dependency injection, Java persistence API. So a lot of these specs that have evolved over time from the Jakarta spec is what Quarkus follows. And then I can add in just some method shells here, or just some shells of methods, right? So we fill in some methods that we think we're going to need, find pets by kind, adopt a pet if it's found, and they just really do nothing, right? And we also have to implement, the other thing Quarkus gives us is this whole repository. Let me just type it here, panache repository of type pet. It gives us all of these base operations, right? So if I were to look here at the class hierarchy, there's a ton of methods that are already there that I kind of get for free, like all your basic CRUD operations, reading, searching, getting, updating, persisting, deleting, all that fun stuff is just kind of given to you out of the box. And so now you can see over on I keep pointing here, like you can see what I'm pointing at. You can see all my methods now are not read anymore. So everything actually does compile, and as I come back to my, you can actually see it actually ran all 4 tests, and all 4 tests passed, which is great, but there's nothing in the tests, right? So the principle of test-driven development is you write your tests, they should fail, and then you implement your code until your tests pass, and then you stop, right? Well, do I stop because my tests are green? Probably not, right? Because the test doesn't do anything, because it's just a shell right now, right? So, but you can see the general pattern you follow is you set up some state that's kind of like your base state. You apply some stimulus to it, and then you do some assertion. So it's kind of like, given this state, when I do this, then I expect this thing to happen, right? And so that's what I'm going to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to persist a new pet, persist new pet. Why did it do com.example? That's weird. New pet. Fido the dog. Right? Why is it? Because I think the AI did something weird. Did it do something weird here? Yeah, it did. It put it in the wrong package, right? Com.example. This should be org.acme, right? That's why it's trying to import stuff. Never trust AI, right? Because it always gets you into trouble. Now I got to clean all this mess up. It takes you longer to clean up the mess than it does just to do it yourself sometimes. I see you're laughing over there. Right. Did it not do the right constructor either for me? Probably not. String name, string kind. Persist. I don't know why it's not taking it. New. Fido. And why is it not taking it? Something's not right here. Yeah, something's really not right here. The constructor's there. Cannot resolve the method persists. Oh, because it still got the import. That was wrong. There we go. Now it's good. So now I can say, so when I persist a pet and I want to find it, say I want to say find all the pets for a specific dog, right? Or I want to find any pet, any available pets for adoption that are dogs. So I can say assert that find pets by kind dog is not null, right? Because we never want to deal with null. And we remember our thing is a list. So in my case, I only put one pet in, so there should only be one dog, right? If I look for a dog, so I can say single element, and I can say extracting its name, kind, contains Fido the dog, right? And we're just going to do one test for now because we're running out of time. And if you notice, my test is already failing because it says my test failed. And the test failed because it's returning null, and I said assert that it's not null, right? So now I can come back over here and I can implement this method. So I can say, so I want to, instead of return null, I want to do a find, not find by kind, I want to do find. And with Quarkus, I can actually shorten. So if you think of like a SQL statement that I would build here, this would be like select star from pets where kind equals something. Well, I can eliminate most of that. All I care about is the where clause. So I can just say where kind, kind is the kind that I expect, right? Oh, not find, this should be list, right? Because I want to return a list of all the pets of that kind. Yep, and now my application should actually, the test should actually run and should be successful. Yep, so now all my tests pass, so I'm good. Right, and you could follow the same pattern going, for the rest of the tests in the repository layer, but let's get to the web layer. Right, so if I kind of apply the same pattern here, I know I'm going to need some in Jakarta RS, which is the spec for RESTful applications for building a REST endpoint or talking to anything over REST. They call it the resource class. It's just what they call it. Anybody familiar with Spring? A couple people familiar with Spring. So like in Spring MVC, it would be called a controller. It's just nomenclature, really. So I can write oops, that's caps lock, a pet resource tests, right? Move this over here. Right, I can say at Quarkus test, and then I can throw in my tests, right? And rather than write them all, I'm actually just going to have it implement all the tests just because we're getting short on time. Yep, now I got to go resolve all these things. So I'm using Mockito as a mocking framework. So when I test the resource layer, I want to have control of the persistence layer because my resource layer will talk to the persistence layer. I want to be able to, like, when I set up a test data, I want to be able to set a certain state in my repository so that I can test my resource layer. So I'm going to use mocking to do that at the persistence layer. So I need to import all of these things. You would think I've done this so many times I could actually remember what I wanted to do. Right, need to import that. It's from Rest Assured, which is a testing framework.
Do you like mocking out your persistence layer better than like actually Flyway or doing database or something?
So Flyway, so the question was, for those who can't hear, is do you like mocking the persistence layer versus just using like the real thing? And for me, it's I don't really have any rhyme or reason as to when or why I do one over the other. I just kind of do. Sometimes I like to do mocking. Sometimes I just like to use a real persistence layer and just wire in the repository and set the state. I don't feel that there's any right or wrong answer. It's just kind of the mood that I'm in at that point. All right, import static. All right, something's not compiling here, but kind of the point where I was going with this, and I know it's really short on time here, is I could actually come back to my AI now, and I could say, hey, I have these tests. Can you actually implement the class that satisfies those tests, even though it's not compiling it? It might work, it might not. Let's see here. So it gave me an implementation here. So I'm just going to pull it in, and then I know if you just have to take it on blind faith and trust me that it actually is and it does the right thing. So I actually named it the right thing. So it gave me a resource class at path that produces. You don't really need that. Get all, get by ID. Yeah, so this actually does satisfy all the tests, this class, and I didn't have to write it. So the AI wrote it for me, but I wrote the test. And it actually did it from tests that don't compile. So that was pretty cool. I haven't tried that before. So I know I'm getting low on time here. I know, did you have a question in the back?
Not very deep questions. I was actually just curious if...
Oh, they're going to bring you...
Is that the mic so they can record me?
Yep.
Excellent. Mostly, I was just curious about the test integration you were describing earlier with your IDE. And I was wondering whether that is a generic kind of Java feature, whether the tests are... there's a specific format to test so that works kind of generically, or whether that requires you to write tests in a specific way or use a specific testing framework.
So this continuous testing feature you meant, this is specific to Quarkus. This is something Quarkus gives you. It has nothing to do with the IDE. If you were an Emacs or VI person, this would still work.
Okay.
It doesn't rely on any IDE plugins. It's just when you run Quarkus in its dev mode, it understands the relationships. And if I had written more tests and I changed like one line of code, it would only rerun one or two tests, not my whole test suite. It understands the relationships between the code and the tests. And that's just something Quarkus does.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, what are your thoughts on like code coverage?
So code coverage. So should you always strive for 100% code coverage? Probably not. It's probably not realistic. So there's this curve, what I call it curve of diminishing return, right? If you write one test, you're going to get a huge amount of coverage and it's going to give you a huge benefit. If you write 2 tests or 4 tests or 8 tests, you're going to get to maybe 50, 60, 70% coverage. But if you try to squeeze to get to 100% coverage, you're just going to kind of waste your time almost. Like, because you're going to be like testing these cases. You're going to, like I said, you're going to have to go back to like, okay, I have this POJO. I called the set method and I asserted that the get method gave me what I just set. That it's kind of dumb at that point. What I like is a thing called mutation coverage, where if you have a threshold of coverage, you might be at like 75%. If you introduce a new feature, you can run a mutation. You can say, how much has my code mutated and has my coverage gone up or down over a period of time? I think that's a better approach because you can measure yourself over time rather than saying like SonarQube saying you need to have 80% code coverage. Because for some projects it's highly achievable, and some projects it just doesn't make sense. So you kind of have to figure that out on your own particular team. Does that answer your question? Was there another question? Oops.
I just have a follow-on to that question. I'm curious. Do you think that your answer there differs depending on whether you're using a compiled versus an interpreted language?
I'm only a compiled language kind of guy.
Okay.
So I Java champion. I don't really go outside the Java space too much.
Fair enough.
So
All right.
I don't know. I don't really have an opinion. So yeah, so our code works. We can prove it. If you want to know more about Quarkus, we have our sample application to superheroes. I'm also the maintainer of this project, so feel free to give it a try. It's a bunch of different microservices. And thank you very much. So there's the slides. They should be there. If they're not, ping me on social media, and I'll figure out why they're not, but they should be. So thank you for your time, and thanks for coming, and thanks for sticking around.